This lesson reviews what stem and leaf plots are and how to create histograms using frequency tables. First, let's remind ourselves about a stem and leaf plot. A stem and leaf plot is a type of data table that groups data, that is, that groups numbers in a set using stems and leaves. And just as with a tree branch, the stem would be the first part and the leaf is the part hanging off the end, in a number, the stem would be the first digits and the leaf would be the very last digits. So in this case, 2 would be the stem and 4 would be the leaf. So 23 would have the same stem, so it would go in the same row, but it has a different leaf. So if we were making a stem and leaf plot, in this case, we would have the stem, which in this case represents the tens place, and the leaf, which in this case represents the ones place. Both of these two numbers have a 2 as the stem. They have a 2 in the tens place. The lowest, the smallest of the leaves, is 3. The next smallest is 4. And if we had other numbers that were in the 20s, we would continue to put their ones digits out here. So this is one way that we can take a set of data and figure out how many bits of that data fall in a particular interval. So in this case, every number in the stem column represents an interval of 10, right? Because 2 here represents 2 in the tens place. So any numbers that are in the 20s, from 20 to 29, will go in this row. The word frequency, when we use it in math, simply tells us how often something happens. So if you go to a class that has a frequency of twice a week, that class meets 2 times a week. In math, the something happening that we're talking about is generally that data points fall within a range or an interval. So in the stem and leaf plot above, we have a frequency of 2 for numbers falling within this interval, the interval here being the 20s. A frequency table is a way of sorting data into specified intervals and counting how many data points fall in each interval. And a histogram is a graphical representation of a frequency table. So let's look down below and see how we make a frequency table. So here's an example of a problem that says the average ticket prices, and we've rounded to the nearest dollar, charged by Major League Baseball teams in a recent year were listed below. And we'd like to make a frequency table for the data. So the steps that we're going to use to do this, it says first choose intervals of equal size for the data. In order to do that, we would need to look up here and see what's the range that those intervals need to cover. In other words, what's the smallest number in our data set and what's the largest number in our data set. Now I notice that it looks like 8 is the smallest number in our data set. So our very lowest interval should start down at 8. And then our highest interval it looks like we go up to 24 here. Now, so our range there, we go from 8 to 24. We're going up by 16. In this case, if we look at, we want to have a total of 6 different intervals. When we take 16 divided by 6, we don't get a nice even number. And so we're going to round that to the nearest integer. In this case, we're going to have intervals of 3. So 8, 9, and 10 will be the first interval. 11, 12, and 13 will be the second. 14, 15, and 16, 17, 18, and 19, 20, 21, and 22, and 23, 24, and 25. Now it's important to notice that our intervals are all the same size. Even though this top interval actually goes a little bit higher than we needed it to, for a graph to accurately represent the data, we're going to need for our intervals to be the same size. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go through this list of data up above, and as we cross off each specific data point, each ticket price, we're just going to make a tally mark for where that one would go. So 23, I'll put a tally mark here. 24, a tally mark here. 20, a tally mark here, and so on. And we'll continue doing this until we've placed all of the data points in the table above somewhere, or that are listed above somewhere in this table. All right, now I've placed all of the data into the table in tally marks. All I need to do next is to count up. So how many of the prices fell in the $8 to $10 range? There's 4 tick marks there. So the frequency, how often did that happen, was 4. From $11 to $13, there were 9 teams that charged that much. From 14 to 16, there were 5. From 17 to 19, there were 7. From 20 to 22, there were 3. And from 23 to 25, there were 2. And so now I have my frequency table. And if I wanted, I could make a graph where across the bottom I had these intervals and up the side these frequencies. You're going to work through this last page of problems. On the top, for problem 1, which is everything above the middle half of your page, you're going to mark the different lengths in this tally sheet, total them up, and then make a histogram. In part 2, you'll see the distance that Mark McGuire hit a number of different home runs. In this case, the dates that are listed here don't actually factor in. You don't need them on your frequency table, and they won't show up in your histogram. What you're going to do instead is you're going to go through these distances, and you're going to tally up distances. Now in this case, we do have intervals. They're intervals of 50 each. So I'll look at this first home run was 364. Where does that belong? That belongs here in the 350 to 399 range. And I'll continue going through until I've crossed out all of the distances here. And then I'll have my tallies, and I can total them up to make a frequency table. And then you can create a graph down below. You'll need to decide, based on which column has the greatest number of marks in it, which interval had the highest frequency, what marks to use on the y-axis of your frequency table here. Once you're done with that, this worksheet is self-checking. You'll notice that a number of different answer blanks have letters next to them. So for example, in this case, the total that you have for bats of length 34, that's an O. So you're going to find out whatever number that is, and then down below, you're going to mark an O in the space that goes with the answer that's in that block.